part of our video series for Jordan Digital Marketing, we're here talking with Jonathan McCartney about how the impacts between AEO and PR interplay with one another and understanding sort of like what the next steps are for like a modern organic marketing campaign. Thanks for joining us, John. Really look forward to the conversation.
Thanks a lot, Tyler, for having me on. And also thanks again for the partnership that our two firms have had over the years. It's been really great being part of this journey with your team. I want to just quickly say, words of appreciation there.
Awesome. No, thank you. I think it's been awesome working with you guys as well. It's really helpful to us as a business and to a bunch of our clients too. So it's been amazing. And I think like one of the really interesting things now being that, your background is strictly PR and ours is strictly on the marketing side. But now we're starting to see the sort of like two channels blend in a lot of ways as we move into this new AI world. What kinds of interest are you seeing from brands these days? And how is it shifting from the PR perspective from your side?
Yeah, for sure. So just a quick background on my firm, JMAC PR. We've been around for 6 years. We specialize in PR marketing for companies in the technology space and also agencies. I've been in the business for about 25 years between New York, San Francisco, and now I'm based in Los Angeles. PR, up until I think the AI era boom, PR was more about just, brand awareness and thought leadership. And now we're seeing a shift from hey, we need press, no one knows who we are, to, hey, how do you help us become more discoverable in the machines? People are now recognizing that to be discovered in ChatGPT, Perplexity, Claude, and all the machines, you will need to really take a hard look at what you're doing in PR. Because to be discovered in the LLMs, you're going to need to start building up some credible earned media, third-party links, which is basically where PR comes in. So we're just seeing that shift from, hey, we just need press, to how do you help us become more discovered in the machines?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think, in all honesty, I think that's sort of like better than the old school like link building model where it's actually more about what are people saying about your brand rather than what are they linking back to, because I think that's more indicative of like a sign of trust from other brands. So I think it's an interesting change and like a fundamental shift in like organic discoverability. But like, I think it's a really nice one because at the end of the day, the goal is to try and find ways that people are showing trust in a brand. And like the old way used to be link building, and now the new way is more PR brand mentions. So I think that's, and again, I think that's like more indicative of somebody trusting a brand. So I think it's an exciting change.
It is. And I would even add that there is still value in companies as far as, hey, no one knows who we are. We got to get our name out there. We got to get our executives more out there, because a lot of that stuff does build credibility. It does build legitimacy. It does build trust. I always say, like, look, PR is without a doubt one of the main lead gen drivers. You can build an amazing product, but if no one's writing about it, how are you going to believe in the company and the product? So I always like to say, like, when you think about PR, think of us as also not only your sort of eyes and ears on what the market is saying and how do we get you more out there, but we're also have a very important seat at the table when it comes to your sales team.
Yeah. Absolutely. I actually think that's exactly how I think about PR too, is like at the core of it, I think marketing and sales are all about building trust in your customer and get them to exchange money for services or goods, right? Like that's the core of what marketing and sales is, right? But as part of that, like whenever I'm making a purchase, almost universally what happens is I go and like I find a brand, then I go search. And this is actually another thing that AI is doing a lot of, is like they're searching like Reddit is like a main influencer, because like one of the best ways for me to find like tainted like reviews, like super true reviews of products, is through Reddit. And I think the other area that I use is like just seeing what people have written about the product or service to understand how it's being perceived in the market and who is giving it the stamp of its approval, right? So it's like all these things are getting rolled into AI. But I think in terms of like PR specifically, it really helps me when I'm making a personal decision about something, identify like who is giving like their vote of confidence to a certain brand or service, right? And so like from that perspective, I think in instances where it's not necessarily introducing me to a brand, PR very often is operating as like a way to speed my process through the funnel of a product or service. Like it makes me want to convert because other people are saying that it's good. You know what I mean? And
100%.
that's the way that we've like treated it for our business too.
100%. Like for me, one of the things I enjoy doing is I like going out to restaurants, and I'm always, one of my favorite prompts is going into like, GPT and like, hey, show me the best reviewed restaurants in this neighborhood, especially anything from these specific websites or outlets. And that gives me a better understanding and better confidence, if you will, on, okay, these are some, reliable sources, and it's going to make my decision making process much better.
Actually, a really interesting prompt I've never thought of using. Service restaurants, but like obviously that makes sense. No, it's amazing. Yeah, I'm sort of curious also, have brand expectations on your side and like requests of your agency shifted? Like how have they shifted with like this new introduction of like the LLM element that's not just pure PR? Have you shifted your services to like reflect what's happening with AEO and LLMs?
Yeah, for sure. So for us, I always like to say that my team, one of our main philosophies is being very results driven, very outcomes based, because we're very mindful of the trust that's given to us from our client partners as far as, hey, we're paying you to get us press, and we're paying you to also give us ideas. And I always want to make sure that we're delivering on those two fronts. But as we're navigating in this world of AI, one of the things that I'm also looking to do more of is, what are we doing? What are we doing right now in the world of like thought leadership? And what that means is like we work with clients in helping them create some compelling, engaging content that can be used in their marketing campaigns, but also from us, from a PR standpoint, to be leveraged for thought leadership activities. So that includes like writing, ghost written 800-word opinion pieces that we can get placed from an earned media standpoint in one of their target trades. And one area also, because of AI, that we're starting to do more so is helping brands create Wikipedia pages. We're working with a consultant who's one of the actual official editors at Wikipedia to give us sort of the lay of the land of like, okay, here's the sort of blueprint on how your client's Wikipedia page should look like. And so that's something that's also part of our service offering, because we also recognize that with the machines, they're going to pull stuff also from Wikipedia. So that's sort of an area of where my agency has changed due to AI.
So I'm sort of curious also, like I want to take you even a step back, like if you're setting up a PR program for a client, like how do you prioritize who to reach out to and what outlets are most meaningful? And and it sounds like Wikipedia is one that you're focusing on that maybe you wouldn't have otherwise focused on, but like, what are some other like tweaks and changes that you've had to make in the last, year and a half, 2 years to reflect this new offering?
Yeah, for sure. So we always, before we begin any PR program, we always do a couple initial steps at the beginning. One is, we're very big into data and insights. So we always like to do a sort of a deep dive into like, okay, where is this client at from a PR performance standpoint? Have they gotten some press? Have they not gotten some press? And also identifying, who are their 3 sort of ideal customer profiles that they need to get in front of. And then from there, we also take a look at like, okay, who are their competitors and what kind of coverage are they getting? And that also gives us the data and insights to help us come up with, okay, a very viable PR strategy that's going to include some compelling pitch angles that's going to then get in front of their target trade outlets and writers and podcasts, and also looking at some of the various industry analysts at like Forrester or Gartner, because that's part of our mandate is to start building these bridges to these places where their target customers are going to. And then obviously always being mindful of like, how do we convert these opportunities into actual published articles and content from these trade outlets? So that's sort of like what we look at when we start working with any of our client partners.
That's awesome. I think the other thing too, from like an AEO perspective, what we've seen is like been really interesting is there's always like, it's really hard to give like a one size fits all approach to like how you should focus your attention on where to write content. Like Reddit, Wikipedia, YouTube, and LinkedIn are consistently, in the top 10 or whatever. for almost every client we work with, but there's always like one or two like industry trades that's really impactful. And it's super dependent. Like you need somebody to do that research and understand because like that's the area where it's really hard for us to give a clear cut, like these are the areas where you need to focus your content. Because there's always one or two for every industry where it's like, this is very industry specific, but you got to be here, you know? So yeah, that's one of the things that we've seen just from an AEO perspective, which is why I sort of asked that question is like what your approach is. That's awesome. So like, I think you mentioned sort of like what you do and what good looks like, but what do you think brands right now are doing wrong about PR and what PR can do for them?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a couple of things that I'll just say off the top of my mind. There is this, there is still some myth amongst business leaders that when you hire a PR firm or even a freelancer or any kind of PR support, that it will automatically be like a magic wand, like, hey, okay, we hired somebody, we're gonna overnight see an increase in, awareness, and that's not how it works in reality. So I think that's one thing that, brands sort of, there's like a myth there. But I would even add that, when companies sort of view PR as sort of like a short-term fix, um, that's really doing a disservice because you're not looking at the bigger picture. And I understand as a business owner, one of the main sort of challenges for any business is resources. Like, what resources do you have? But I also believe that, when it comes to like PR, businesses has to have that as one of the important line item investments. It doesn't have to be a big PR firm. It could be
Mm-hmm.
somebody like a freelancer, just to making sure that they're getting some pitches out and getting some secured interviews and stories written about the business and about the executives, because you need to start somewhere. You need to start being intentional about, okay, if I want to show up in the machines, then what am I doing from a PR standpoint? So like I had a conversation with an early stage startup the other day, and he was saying, the business owner was saying to me, like, look, totally get it. Definitely want to do PR. We can't afford you. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, well, I can refer you to a consultant who's, you could work with more so, and we'll give you a couple hours a month, and we'll probably be a little bit more affordable, if you will. And so I made that connection. But at the very least, businesses have to recognize that it's not a short-term fix. It's really a long-term investment.
Yeah. I think that's what's really interesting about like PR pairing so well right now with like SEO and AEO. Because I also think for like the way that SEO had been changing over the last couple of years, I think like a real PR program rather than like just a link building campaign is like what everything was trending towards anyway. But like I think they both run similarly where like if you're thinking about either as a quick fix, like you're thinking about it wrong. You know what I mean? Like you got to be in it for the long game and be able to go and build that trust in third party sources so that people are comfortable exchanging money for whatever you're offering. You know what I mean? I think you hit the nail on the head. And I think one other question that I kind of ask is like a follow up, could just having worked in house at companies that didn't have a necessarily great PR firm. And I feel like I've seen firsthand also just sort of like what I've seen firms charge like a lot of money and not really deliver on like results. How would you recommend anybody listening or watching, like what are some things to look out for from your PR agency that should be red flags that they should consider worrisome?
No, for sure. I think there's a couple of things. One is, how often are they delivering new opportunities? At the very least, there should be at least one new opportunity a week. I mean, if whoever you're working with isn't even delivering on that, then that's a red flag. I think also making sure that you work with a team or contractor that's intentional about coming up with some new PR pitch angles, strategies. I think that's part of showing like the value of people who are sort of mandated into sort of managing your PR campaign. I also think that, is the are you getting the right level of service? Because we are in a service
Yeah.
minded industry. And if you're not hearing from your PR team or your contractor, there is this sort of notion of like, then they're not doing anything. So I think those are three important key areas that any business should be really mindful of when you're looking to invest in PR help.
No, that's really helpful because I think like paying attention to the level of service and the number of opportunities being delivered to you. Because like at the end of the day, like everybody's going to judge on results, but those are sort of earlier indicators than we haven't gotten any placements in the last 3 months or whatever. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's really helpful. Cool. Yeah. And then I think the other thing too is sort of like for brands that are trying to like go it alone and maybe not looking to engage in PR agency, what are some like tips that you would give to them? Like, what are some things that you should consider? And what are the realistic expectations of doing PR without, our agency?
No, for sure. I think number one, every brand business should really take a hard look at what is the ideal story or narrative that they want to make sure is being told to the marketplace. And maybe it's there in your sales deck, and I always say to client partners that you have some really good content in your sales deck. You just need to sort of finesse it in a way where it's a little bit more appealing in getting in front of like the people in the media. So getting your core story really baked. I think it's also looking at your executives and saying, "Hey, do they have buy-in in participating in talking to the press?" Because you need them. You can't just do it alone. You
Yeah.
can't just say, "Okay, business, yes, we need press." And then if your CEO or any of your executive team is like, "You know what? I don't have time." Well, if you don't have time, then it's not going to get off the ground. So you need buy-in from your stakeholders that yes, we will participate in any PR opportunities and PR efforts. I think it's also about, and tied to that, it's really making sure that your stakeholders are understanding that they're here to also start building and cultivating relationships with key journalists. That you need to also sort of buy in that this is the long game. If there are key journalists
Yeah.
at key trades that you want to make sure that you are on their radar, then you got to buy into like, okay, I'm looking at the long game. Like, for example, we have a couple of clients in the ad tech space. So Ad Exchange is like one of the number one trade outlets. So we want to make sure our clients are building those relationships with those key editors and journalists. And then also just really, I think it's also just having some really strong point of views, because these are things that have a lot of value when you're trying to get in front of the media. Because for us, and this is another myth that I forgot to mention before, but there is this also myth from businesses and brands like, oh, we'll just write a press release. The media will write it. Press releases are more table stakes. Anyone can write a press release. But what's really going to move the needle is having also your stakeholders coming up with some really compelling insights and POVs that can then be shared with the media, whether it's through just straight media email pitching or putting your insights into a really cohesive 800-word piece that can then get placed in one of your target trade outlets. I think that's also going to be important. But I also understand, every business, and I mentioned this before, resources. What
Yeah.
resources do you have? I would say that, for companies, who are looking at resources or even like, hurdles, I think there's a couple of things that I would just say, like, look, think about PR as sort of like a garden. You're not going to say, okay, I have a garden bed, and then like overnight, you're going to see like things sprout. It doesn't work that way. You have to really maintain your garden same way as you have to maintain your PR efforts. So it's the long, I think it's things that you're like, okay, I want to start building key open lines with some journalists and trades. I want to be able to make sure that my executive teams are really buying into participating in any PR opportunities that come in. You also want to make sure that you're thinking ahead or having folks who are experts in PR to help you think ahead of like, what do we have coming up in Q2, for example? What are some key things and that we could sort of maybe hang our hat on for like some really new compelling PR campaigns. But I also think that, as I mentioned before, like making sure that you are clear on your core narrative and your story angle, things evolve. You could try out some messaging, and if it doesn't work after a quarter or two, pivot. And I think that's one of the great opportunities when it comes to PR. It's like we always take a look at like the marketplace and see like, okay, what's happening, like, and then and then we sort of adapt.
Yeah. No, I love that. I also really like one of the things that stood out to me there too is like you talking about spending the time to build the relationships with the people influential in your space. And I think one of the things that I always talk about, or that I've sort of shifted my mind to, is like one of the hardest things for AI to replace is going to be those relationships you build. So I feel like if everybody's trying to, steel themselves against the future of this like AI wave that's coming for us, I think that's a really great recommendation for anybody in this space. Awesome. So yeah, I also like so we talked a lot about sort of what good looks like, what people should expect working with a PR professional, or what they'll miss by not working with a PR agency. Are there any like surprising PR tactics that are really working well that have shifted with the introduction of LLMs and AEO? Is there anything new that you think brands should really try and lean into?
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a couple of things that I would sort of share as far as a really good tried and true PR tactics. One is this thing we call either newsjacking or trendjacking, but basically looking at anything that's breaking news in your industry and seeing like, okay, how do we maximize this report or coverage to our clients? Like, for example, for you, Tyler, if there's anything that's breaking on like SEO or anything on digital marketing, hey, dude, give us some commentary that we can then sort of merchandise to the media. It works because, again,
Yeah, and there we've done a lot. We did a lot around like third-party cookie deprecation when that was supposedly going to be a thing, and like a lot of stuff around this AEO topic too. So
yeah,
yeah, that's been all really, really helpful stuff. Yeah.
yeah. So that's one very tried and true tactic that works, especially with respect to like AEO. And I also think like, you know, looking at, making sure that your team or whoever is in charge of your PR is really making sure that there is a consistent sort of cadence of trade coverage, versus waiting for like those big like home run media hits. You have to, and I'm a big sports fan, but it's always about like, yeah, let's get our singles and our doubles. Yeah. And then we're going to try for a home run. But as long as there's some
Yeah.
consistent singles and doubles, then that's going to help you with your AEO. I would also say, look at your LinkedIn strategy. Like, what are you doing on LinkedIn? Because I think a lot of the sort of commentary and point of views that you're getting on LinkedIn, it will go downstream and it could be useful in any PR efforts. So I do think that
Mhm.
there's also that sort of intersection between like LinkedIn and PR that you should also explore. And then also to look, just taking a look at your key verticals that you need to really show up in and find ways of like, how are they covering the news that's relevant to your business, and trying to sort of reverse engineer an angle that's going to be more appealing to those trade outlets to want to set up a meeting with you, which could eventually lead to coverage, or at the very least, creates a bridge that you can start cultivating and maintaining that relationship.
Yeah. I really like the approach of just trying to hit like a couple singles and doubles rather than just trying to get that big placement. Cause like that's been a lot of like what we've done with you. And I think like where I have seen historically in other parts of my career, I've seen PR agencies fail as they're just chasing, a placement and something a little bit too big for where we should be. And then you end up striking out, and then it's like, well, no, we just haven't got anything. Like having a consistent drumbeat is really impactful. And I think you're right. Like from an AEO perspective, having somebody mentioning something about your brand is going to be a good trust signal for them to look at. So like, I love that. That's a really great recommendation. Awesome. What types of resources do brands need to have on their in-house teams to fully take advantage of the benefit of an agency like yours? So like if somebody does want to work with JMAC PR, what allows them to be your ideal customer, and like vice versa? That means like what gives them the opportunity to get the most out of this engagement working with you?
Yeah, for sure. There's a couple important things that brands and businesses need to have in order to really take full advantage of the benefits of a PR firm like ours, or if they want to, work with a PR contractor. But I think number one, it starts with the messaging. What are the sort of three key messages that you want to make sure is sort of codified amongst your stakeholders about your brand or your business? And also, what is that story that you want told to the media? I think brands, most times, they just skip this part and they're like, hire PR support, start pitching. But if you don't know what your message is,
Mm-hmm.
then what are we doing here? So it's got to be a little bit, strategic off the bat. And I do think you also need to make sure that there is full alignment between your marketing sort of teams. So that includes, your PR team, your go-to-market team, your content arm. There's got to be full alignment. I think when you have everyone walking in step together, I think that creates a recipe for really positive outcomes there. I think you also, and I mentioned this before, you need buy-in from your stakeholders and your key spokesperson. You're going to need to have them say, hey, we need you to provide commentary, or we need you to be available for this podcast interview or this media interview. And you just need it. If you have a situation where your key spokesperson is like, I just don't have time. And look, we all are busy. But, I always say, like, if you don't show up for these opportunities, your competitors are going to show up, and then they're going to get the glory. And then when you decide, like, oh, I'm ready, you're already too late. That ship has sailed. So again, you need people that are very intentional about that. I do think that not everyone knows PR, but you do need sort of either someone on the brand side or business side, whether it's your key marketing person, or even like we work with CEOs sometimes directly, and we always use these as opportunities to really help them better understand the world that we're operating in. And I think you do need to have that level of understanding on both sides on what exactly is PR, what are we trying to achieve, especially when it comes to AEO. Again, this is a long game. This is not a short-term thing. And I think finally, I think brands and business, they have to truly be willing to invest in like consistency across all touch points. That includes like, what are we doing in building our internal editorial calendar? What are we doing on our LinkedIn strategy? What are we doing on our go-to-market approach? How are we also sort of making sure that all of these things are going to be lockstep with what are we doing on the PR side? And then also like just looking at ways to like, okay, what are other ways where we could also try and make sure that we're using PR to also help us with our AEO? Like, what's your Wikipedia strategy? What's your Reddit strategy? There are these other things too, like it's just super helpful. Or like, hey, maybe brands want to create their own podcasts. I think that's also delivers value, and especially important from a thought leadership standpoint.
That's awesome. I think like a lot of what you covered off on really aligns well with what we look for in companies too. But a lot of it also is like core foundations to a good marketing program, right? So like understanding your messaging and your branding, what story you're trying to tell, like who you're trying to be. Like those are foundational things, but we see a lot of companies come to us eager to spend money, eager to do marketing without having ever thought about those like foundational questions that need to be thought of. And then I think the other thing too that you mentioned is like full alignment is like one of the things that we always look for is, whereas you mentioned you're willing to like work with CEOs and things like that, we always are looking for at least like one marketing lead, because you do need someone who like specifically understands what you do to be able to like help you get shit done. You know what I mean? Like otherwise, without that internal buy-in or somebody who can like make the case internally, everything just sort of dies on the vine and you're just stuck there. But yeah, that's awesome. One last question I want to ask you is, we've talked a lot about some of the things that are changing and where things are going. What are some of the tactics that you do today that are different than what you did 3 years ago?
That's a good question. I think when I started the business 6 years ago, I was just a solopreneur. I was at a crossroads and I was like, you know what? Let me try this PR freelance thing out. 6 years later, we have a team of 15 people. And it's like, shit, how did this happen? So number one, definitely how much progress we've done as a team, because it's definitely not just me. So when I look back, I mean, it's really was just sort of blocking and tackling like, your core sort of PR service offerings, media relations, analyst relations, pitching some podcasts, writing bylines. But I think since then, and then I think it's really because of AI, we're expanding into like other service offerings. Like what are we doing? Or what we recognized was there's a couple of things. One, we started layering in or adding and offering support for LinkedIn. So I think that's another area that falls under the thought leadership bucket. So we have a couple sort of client partners where we are ghostwriting very engaging LinkedIn posts to help grow their followers, because we view LinkedIn as a really good sort of thought leadership channel, but also from a sort of lead gen channel.
Yeah.
So I think that's one area. And then the other areas that we are doing is building Wikipedia pages. So just recognizing that, we were able to meet an official editor with Wikipedia who can help us sort of be our shepherd in building, a Wikipedia page draft that will put us in the best position to get approval. So those are two new service areas that we started
Yeah.
recently.
No, that's awesome. And I think both of those are just like hugely impactful and hugely impactful for AEO in general and just like for businesses in general. No, this has been an amazing conversation, John. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for joining us. And I really look forward to talking with you again soon.
You got it. Thanks so much, Tyler.
Yeah, thank you.